The word compassion is drawn from two words, cum and patio. Compassion means, therefore, to suffer with one who is suffering. It means to step into the shoes of someone who is in pain and to experience the pain and the suffering that that person is experiencing. To sympathize and to do much more than sympathizing, but to empathize. Grace and peace to you. Today I wish to talk about compassion. The word compassion is drawn from two words, cum and patio, which have Latin meanings. Cum means with and patio means to suffer. So etymologically, the word compassion means to suffer with. Compassion means, therefore, to suffer with one who is suffering. It means to step into the shoes of someone who is in pain, to step into the shoes of someone who is going through suffering and to experience the pain and the suffering that that person is experiencing. It means to identify oneself with one who is in a disadvantaged situation. It is putting oneself in the place of another, to sympathize and to do much more than sympathizing, but to empathize with them, which means going above just having the felt feeling that the person is in pain and doing something to be able to lift the person out of the pain where the person finds himself or herself. When it comes to compassion, helping those who are suffering or suffering with some other person, Mahatma Gandhi, that great Indian leader, is of the opinion that it is easy enough to be friendly to one's friends, but to befriend the one who regards himself as your enemy is the quintessence of true religion. The other is mere business, which simply means it is easy for me to stoop down to assist someone who is in pain, who is in suffering, who is my friend, whom I think can be able to extend a helping hand to me in future, rather than help. But it is much more difficult for me to stoop down to the level of someone who considers himself as my enemy or whom I consider as an enemy, because I know that that person can never be able to do anything for me, even after I have assisted or helped the person. And in life we see this very, very common, where people are able to do charity and help their friends, but it becomes difficult to really do charity and help those who are really in need. It is easy for me to lend to somebody who can be able to repay back, rather than to lend to somebody I know can never give back what I am giving to him or her. And that is the way society seems to operate, where people seem to give to those whom they expect to get back and not to those from whom they can never get back anything. And so, like Mahatma Gandhi says, the first instance where I give to a friend who can give back to me is mere business. But the real true Christianity or true charity is when I give or I show or extend charity to someone who can never ever give back to me what I have given to them. It is easy to suffer for one's friends, to pay even the ultimate price for one's friends, rather than for those one does not even know. But when we come to that understanding as Christians that we all are children of the same God, when we come to that understanding that we are brothers and sisters under the fatherhood of God, then we get that understanding and that knowledge that a kindness is never too big or too little to extend to a fellow brother or a sister. Mother Teresa of Calcutta is one of those who have expressed compassion in history and the life of mankind that she can never ever be forgotten. Mother Teresa of Calcutta was a true epitome of compassion in the world. through her own ability to give of herself, to sacrifice herself, to go down to the level of those who were suffering and marginalized and neglected members of the Indian society, to help them and to restore them to dignity, so that they can be able to understand and know that they are human beings and have human dignity and must be treated as such. In one of the instances, there is a story about Mother Teresa and her relationship with the unfortunate of our society. And the story goes in her own words that one day I picked up a man who was lying in the gutter. His body was covered with worms. I carried him to our hospice, Mother Teresa says. He did not utter curses. He did not blame any person for her unfortunate situation. Instead, he simply said, I have lived like an animal in the street, but I shall be dying like an angel, as one who had been loved and taken care of. Mother Teresa says it took us 3 hours, 3 good hours to wash him. And when we had finished, the man looked at the sister who had washed him and said, my sister, I am going back home to God. And then he died. And so this man lived like a pauper, but died with a beaming smile on his face. And Mother Teresa says she had never seen a smile as broad and as beautiful as the smile on the face of this man, for he looked like an angel. This is true compassion. This is real compassion. Being real, sympathizing with our fellow brothers and sisters, empathizing with them, going to that level where we are able to give up our own comfort for them, to see that they are relieved, to see that they are better, to see that they live better than they are in the present circumstances in which they find themselves. This is nothing short of compassion, suffering with the other. Because this man had been neglected, he was lying in the gutter, but Mother Teresa was able to see in him, lying in that gutter, the image and likeness of God, and one who needed to be uplifted so that he could enjoy the dignity that God has given each and every human being, but which this man was being deprived of. She did not go asking who had caused him to be lying in that gutter. She was interested in seeing that the man was living and that he lived like a true child of God, conscious of his own dignity, valuing himself, proud as being made in the image and likeness of God, and a brother to the rest of humanity. For all men are brothers. This parable of the Good Samaritan is one of those good instances where compassion is related to us, where we see compassion at work, where a man is beaten by robbers and lies between Jerusalem and Jericho, and the lawyer and the priest and others pass by and are unwilling to step towards the man to assist him, to lift him up from his bed of pain. They abandon him there, bruised and wounded by robbers, and he lies there helpless. He can't help himself, in need of help. And the lawyer and the priest began rationalizing and philosophizing and looking for reasons why they could not help him or assist him. Humanity, much of it, is in such a sorry condition where there are so many people on the byways of life, suffering in pain, grieving, and needing a good Samaritan to step into their lives and assist them to lift them up again from their pain, from their psychological state in which they find themselves, in their destitution, so that they can begin to feel again their humanness, so that they can begin to experience once more the fact that they are not just abandoned people without a purpose here on earth, but that they are here for a purpose. They are loved not only by a God whom most at times we refer to his love when we talk to others, when we are unwilling to step down to assist them, but that they are loved by people who meet them physically, people who live with them, people they can share their friendship. In fact, there is a saying that there is no exercise better for the heart than reaching down and lifting people up. Mother Teresa herself thinks that there is no exercise better for the heart than reaching down and lifting people up. It is when we are able to reach down to those who are living in the pit of destitution, in the dungeon of suffering, when we are able to look at those who are in the prisons and those who are really suffering in life, and we see how we can be able to lift them up to a situation where they can be able to realize their own human dignity, that we begin to really live as human beings. And there are so many of such people who need our compassion. There are so many of such people in our quarters, in our homes, in our environment, who need our compassion. That we not only are able to pass by them and toss a coin at them, but that we are able to come down to their condition and their situation, to talk with them, to make them feel human. For the greatest poverty that mankind feels today is the poverty or the absence of love. And there are so many who need love and they can't have this love, and they die not because they lack money, because they lack property, but rather because they have no love. And that is exactly the absence of compassion. We can say compassion is the response to the suffering of others that motivates a desire to help, very often irrespective of our own vulnerability and the danger of becoming victims ourselves. And so we cannot always think only about our own selves, but we must be able to think about those people. Think about what is going to happen to them if we do not step down or stoop down to lift them up, rather than thinking about what is going to happen to us if we get into the business of helping them. Many of such people have died. Many of them have lost hope. Many of them have got to a situation where they suffer inconsolably because there was no one ready to stoop down to lift them up. And the world is in such a chaos. Many people are in such a situation. You can therefore understand why Mother Teresa of Calcutta will tell her sisters and the sisters of charity who are spread all around the world today in their thousands and doing the work of picking up people from the gutters and raising them back to life and giving them human dignity, that Mother Teresa herself was doing. Mother Teresa was in the business of always telling them, and she always said this to all the sisters, that let us touch the dying, the poor, the lonely, and the unwanted according to the graces that we have received, and let us not be ashamed or slow to do the humble work. She cautioned her sisters. She invited them to touch the poor, the suffering, the lonely, the neglected, the unwanted, according to the graces that they had. And each one of us has the grace. Each one of us has the ability to sympathize and more so to empathize with our brothers and sisters who are suffering, who are in pain, who are in difficulty. Those, it could be the refugees, it could be those displaced from their homeland, it could be those who are suffering because of war or whatever the cause of their suffering may be. Because mankind is hurting, much of mankind is in pain, and we must be brother to our fellow brothers, sister to our fellow sisters. It is only when we hold our hands together, we join our hands together, that we can be able to move the world forward in a way that is going to be wonderful for each and every one of us and for the world itself. Compassion, actually, as we see, is rooted in man. Compassion is rooted in the heart of man. And compassion motivates us to go out of our way to help and to soothe the pain of someone who is suffering, either physically, spiritually, emotionally. And in fact, the fellow feeling that we feel for one another, that feeling that makes one to dive out, to help a wailing child, to listen to the cry of a baby and one to ask why that baby is crying, is that feeling of compassion that is embedded in each and every human being, that feeling that God has put into each and every one of us, that we seek to identify with the suffering, with fellow humanity, so that when one human being suffers, the rest suffer with it. And true enough, when any other person is suffering, the whole of mankind is suffering, because we share, all of us, in the pain, in the joys, in the sorrows of each and every other human being. And it is that compassion that pushes us to understand the golden rule better. We must do to others what we want them to do to us. Because when we come to the realization that we all are children of God and that we are made in the image and likeness of God, then our Christianity becomes concrete in showing compassion to those who are in pain, showing compassion to those who are suffering, showing compassion to those who need our compassion. And there are so many of them around us. There are so many of them in the world. And we do all this with the mind of Murphy, who is convinced and states with clarity that all I have ever wanted was to reach out and touch another human being, not just with my hands, but with my heart. When I begin to feel for the other human being, then it becomes easy for me to step out, not to wound and hurt and harm and cause them pain, but to relieve them of their pain and uplift them to a situation and state where they feel that they are human, and I share my humanity with them. And so irrespective of how the race, the religion, or the color of whatever person that I get to encounter, he is a human being like myself, has dignity like myself, must be respected like myself. And so when I begin to do unto others what I want them to do to me, then life and the world becomes a real place for living. Life becomes something worth living, and friendship becomes something that I do not seek just for the sake of it, but I seek friendship with others because I understand there is need to live in this world and to be a better person. And I can only be better when I make other people better. And the lack of compassion in the world today is the cause of the chaos that we see everywhere. There is great suffering around the world today, from the religious perspective, from the social perspective, from the economic, the political perspective, and all because of the lack of compassion, all because mankind and many people neglect the fellow feeling and the compassion which they are supposed to be showing out, and think more in terms of what they are able to gather for themselves, gathering fame, gathering material wealth, and so much that many people are in the business of gathering for themselves. But when we begin to realize that all other human beings are like us and every other person is like us, irrespective of our qualification, irrespective of our standing in life, irrespective of our function in life, then we come to the understanding that all men are brothers and we are the same people. When I hurt a brother of mine, tomorrow it could as well be me hurting. And so I know that I must be in the business daily of stooping down to assist and to empathize with those who are in pain and those who are in suffering. So many of the atrocities in history have been alleviated through compassion, when mankind realizes that we as a people cannot allow one part of the world to be in pain and suffering and we sit comfortably. The Holocaust, the Rwandan genocide, the apartheid in South Africa are many of the situations that have been alleviated because mankind realized that the collective compassion of the world could bring about a change in mentality, a change in systems around the world. And so compassion is a necessity and not a luxury. And I, as an individual, I must begin to show compassion to my brothers and sisters, to those I daily encounter. And if we have no peace, then mankind will have no peace. If we are not able to experience love and compassion in our own very heart, then it will be difficult for mankind to experience compassion, to experience love, and to be able to express itself and live as God himself requires mankind and wants us to live. There is a story about 6 men who were trapped in a forest. And in the cold of that forest, it is told that They had logs in their hands, they had sticks in their hands, and they, in that forest, made a fire that was burning. But the fire started dying out. They were happy and satisfied to warm themselves by the flames and the heat that emanated from that fire. And as they warmed themselves, it so happened that as the fire was dying out, there was a woman who stood by that fire with her stick and looked across and saw that the other person on the other side was a black man. And she told herself, I cannot sacrifice my stick to burn this fire for that black person. Another who stood by that fire was a white man who was wealthily dressed, and he looked at his coat and looked at the other man on the other side who was dressed in tattered clothes and said, I cannot throw my stick into the fire to warm that man in his poverty. Another looked around and saw some other person with whom he had a difference and said, I cannot throw my stick in the fire to warm this other person. And it all ended up in a fiasco because the fire died out and these men were consumed by the cold because the fire had died out and they themselves died. It is said that these men died of the cold within and not because of the cold outside. Because one man was not able and willing to throw his stick into the fire to warm the other, they all perished because of their inability to show love, to show concern, to show compassion to one another. But if they had forgotten about their differences and if they had thought in terms of one another as being the image and likeness of God and being a fellow human being, they would have overcome their differences and been able to preserve their lives or preserve themselves. But because of selfishness, which is oftentimes destructive, they all perished. And that is the condition of man in a society today, where people fail to realize they belong to a community and they can and they should be serviceable to one another, and they think only in terms of themselves, what I'm able to get from the community, what I'm able to get from the society. Such that collective compassion becomes something that seems so strange to humanity and to the society, and so many people perish for want of compassion. Let us pray today that we are able, each and every one of us, to live a life of compassion, to be able to touch other people through our compassion, so that we are able to uplift them. Because the greatest thing is looking down, stooping down, or reaching down to lift up a soul, to lift up a brother, to lift up a sister who is in pain, who is in suffering, to lift up one who needs our attention, who needs our care, who needs our resources. It is one of those great things we can do for our society today, which has become so individualistic. Our society today, which has become so materialistic, that people are only concerned about what they are able to gather for themselves. God bless you. God love you. Thank you.